The name of the story is Return Survival and starts like this. "I am dead," are the words said by our protagonist. We're then taken to a panel of a man clutching his neck and breathing heavily. It seems that he's lying in an area with dead bodies surrounding him. He laughs at the fact that it's been 3 years since the zombies have appeared, and the world has basically died due to a lack of resources and human selfishness. He looks back at his life and, with a sigh of relief, states that the fierce fights of his team are over and prepares to stand off against a horde of zombies. He slashes and slices the zombies, but in the end, the horde is too much for him, and he dies with his last words, being that he tried his best to survive over the last 3 years. We're then taken to a panel with a phone ringing, and to our surprise, our protagonist awakens and finds out that he's in the past exactly 6 months before the zombies have appeared. We are then taken to a panel of a lady inviting the protagonist in. She describes the house as having fulfilled all the conditions he mentioned earlier, with one of them being solar panels as well as a fortress-like house, surrounded by high walls whilst being completely isolated. Our protagonist thinks to himself that in case of a conflict with the Chable family, he needs to prepare several houses to hide his assets, and then ultimately decides to buy the house. Later on, we see our protagonist breathing in food as if there's no tomorrow. Whilst making loans on a call, the caller on the line points out that he has already taken out several loans, but our protagonist tells him to proceed with taking out the loan anyway. The caller warns him that he could be killed if he doesn't pay the loan on time, but he brushes him off, telling him that he'd never run away. Later on, we get to see our protagonist working out whilst thinking to himself that exactly 4 months from now, the zombie apocalypse would arrive. He recalls that if a person is bitten or scratched, the wound would become numb, and they would eventually die, but then reawaken as a zombie only 5 minutes later. A single zombie wouldn't be a problem to take care of. The real problem would be a horde of zombies. He recalls that the zombies were feared in the beginning, and as time went by they were feared even more. He also recalls that Korea will become a lawless zone with crimes such as murder, robbery and SA becoming commonplace. Our protagonist feels that all that is happening right now feels like a dream, but he still decides to believe in everything and prepares for the worst case scenario. Even if everything is a dream and the apocalypse doesn't come, it would be better to prepare excessively than be left unprepared, he thinks to himself. Later on we see our protagonist by noodle shop indulging. He recalls that he used to eat here. On his way home, after a long stressful day at work, he hears footsteps, and he hears a man calling him Johan. It is revealed that it's his co-workers. The man's name is Moon Sung, and he is going on about how hard it is for people to get hired at their company. Johan apologizes in an attempt to prevent a confrontation, but remembers that this is the same person who would sacrifice his co-workers just to survive. Even when he got to the survivor camp, he would leak the camp's information to other criminal groups, and as a result the camp was killed. Back to the present, Moon Sung is asking Johan why he's there. Johan decides that he'll just get going, but Moon Sung grabs him asking if he isn't going to stop there. But Johan looks back with a cold gaze, telling him that if he keeps touching him, it will be the death of him. Moon Sung looks at him confused. He proceeds to tell Johan to say it again, but his voice is overshadowed by a woman screaming behind him. Johan looks at the woman in surprise and dashes forward to slice the zombie in half. Everybody looks at him with surprise, but Johan's face is expressionless. Furniture falls down, and people scream. The people look at Johan with a look of shock, and someone can be heard in the distance, screaming to call the police. Johan looks up, and he sees multiple people fighting zombies. It seems that the people are being overwhelmed by the zombies, as some of them are being held by the neck and others being bitten. Johan says that this is crazy, whilst having sweat pour down his face. We're then shown just how terrifying the zombies are as we see zombies biting off a man's ear. Johan looks down with a look of confusion, asking himself why they appeared 4 months earlier. He thinks to himself that things didn't happen as expected, and decides to head back to the shelter. Meanwhile, moving corpses are being reported on the news, with news channels picking up on the infection quickly. Whilst Johan is running, he notices a hand trying to grab him. He turns back and finds that it's his colleague Young Min. Johan asks her what she is doing, and then tells her not to touch other people's bodies. He says that his body reacts regardless of his will, and he could have easily killed her. Johan moves on from the situation, and asks her if she's been bitten or scratched. Young Min replies with a quick no and asks Johan about what's going on right now. Johan replies by saying that he doesn't have time to explain, and asks her what business she has with him. Young-min hesitates but continues to tell him that she thought Johan killing the zombies with a cold gaze was cool. Johan brushes the compliment off, recalling that something happened to him 4 years ago. Johan tells her that if there's nothing else, he'll have to go. Young-min stops him and says that she'll do a favor for him, but Johan tells her that he's not interested, as well as being in no position to give anything out. Young-min thinks to herself that Johan isn't the same person she used to know, but feels that she has to follow him somehow. Johan glances at her with a cold gaze and thinks that she is a person who has the ability to rationalize in a crisis. He recalls that the company was quick to work together in the past, and hopefully, this time, they can last a year. Johan tells her that he is going to Bucheon and that if she can't follow him, she won't help her. In Bucheon, Johan tells her the zombies' weaknesses, which are the temple, eyes, and cervical spine. He tells her that if they come close, she should stab them deeply into those 3 spots. He also says that they'll move about 30 seconds after that before dying. Johan stretches as a zombie sprints to him, and says that he won't say it twice. He tells her that the moment she thinks the zombies are humans, it is the moment she will hesitate, and hesitation will cause her to experience hell. He continues on to stab the zombie through its head, and slashes an incoming one, thus completing his demonstration to Young-min. Johan looks back and tells Young-min that one is behind her. The zombie lunges at her. She takes the knife in hand and tries to stab it in the head, but misses. She falls to the floor, and the zombie crawls closer. It bites her leg. Young-min screams out in pain and calls for Johan. But Johan is busy dealing with zombies coming. When he's done, he gives Young-min a cold gaze, then turns his back to her. She looks at him with a look of shock, as if all the hope in her eyes is gone. Then she remembers his words earlier on the way to Bucheon. I won't help you even if you're endangered. She looks down, realizing that those words were true. She looks back at the zombie biting her leg, takes the knife in her hand, stabs the zombie in its head, and shouts at it, saying it should let her go. She then holds the zombie up above her by the head, and stabs it in its eye. The zombie doesn't die, but then she remembers the weak spot Johan told her about. And then she takes one last swing with the knife and stabs it in its temple. The zombie pauses as blood gushes out of it and then finally falls over on Young-min. Young-min drags herself out from beneath the zombie. She breathes heavily and then vomits. Once she's done, she looks up and sees Johan cutting zombies one by one. A big purple one tries to grab him, but he dodges to the right. He pivots on his right, then slices the zombie's head off. One comes from behind, but he quickly reacts by hitting it with the handle of the blade, then stabs it in its stomach, and finally slices it in half. Meanwhile, Young-min looks at Johan in awe. To her, it looks like he was born to kill the zombies. She realizes that in order to survive, she has to follow him. Once Johan's done dealing with the zombies, he hands her a tissue to clean herself. He asks her if she's been bitten whilst breathing heavily. She says she doesn't know. He asks if she feels pain anywhere. She pauses, then says her thigh. Johan tells her to show him, at the same time having a cold look on his face. She looks at him with a shocked face. He then explains to her that if she doesn't know she's infected, she's not only gonna endanger herself, but everybody around her. She says that even then, how can she show herself in public while looking flustered? Johan tells her that now is not the time to be embarrassed, then tells her that if she doesn't show him, she can't go with him. She stands in silence, then goes ahead with it. Then, just before she undresses, Johan stops her. Young-min asks what she's doing. Johan rips her pants by her thigh. He pauses and says that she has a bite mark but isn't bleeding, which means she isn't infected. He then goes on to explain that he meant she should show him her wound and not take off her pants. Later that day, the two are walking in the city, and in the distance, Johan spots a taxi. He then tells Young-min that they should split up. Young-min is confused by this. Johan goes on to explain that there are no infected people here and it'll be safe if she's alone there, but she should still be careful. Young-min refuses, but Johan asks her if she knows anyone in Incheon. She replies that her dad, mom, and little sister are there. Johan then says that she's got people waiting for her. Young-min then asks if he's got any family, but Johan stays quiet and remembers his mom holding his hand while they look towards an orphanage. We're then taken to a panel of a younger Johan looking out at what seems to be his mom saying goodbye to a child. And then she even asks if the child is hungry. Back to the present, Johan holds his hand out, then clenches it. Then replies that he doesn't have any. He then says they should split up and then starts walking away. But Young Min shouts his name out, he looks back, then she asks where he is going so that she can go there with her family. Johan then says that she can't tell her. She then says that he's too cold. Then suggests that if they meet by coincidence, maybe they could stay with him. He nods, then tells her that she should never tell people where her resources and people are. Then he urges her to remember that if there are too many people in one place like 20, then a zombie wave will occur, and if they are weak they will die, and that she should run away if she's in that group. We're then taken to a panel of zombies filling streets in a passage saying that if a large group of humans stays in one place, then there will be an endless amount of zombies, and that a survivor camp has a maximum of 20 people, and 10 of those are experienced fighters. This is a rule made from the experience of not seeing any survivor camp survive 1 month ignoring this rule. For Young Min, it'll be difficult because she had a tendency to rely on others. Later that day, Johan arrives at a house filled with supplies, like food and tons of water. He sits down and decides that he'll survive 6 months in this house. He then hears noises outside, and is surprised that they already arrived. He then sees that if it's at this pace then he's gonna have to move in 3 months, not 6, and that even if 3 months passes people will learn to protect themselves from zombies. Only then will he go out into the streets and connect multiple camps. He thinks to himself that whatever it takes, he has to get stronger than them, the most brutal human trash group. He throws his controller at the TV, then promises himself he'll be stronger before the sole survivor unity comes into play.
Later, in a convenience store, a man screams as zombies surround and immobilize him. A zombie behind him bites him, then a group of people scream in horror. Now multiple zombies are attacking him. The man thinks to himself that they had no choice than to leave the basement, and maybe it was a reckless decision. 3 out of the 9 people had died. They all look at the horde feasting on their fallen members. The man with a hoodie tells them not to fight the zombies and they should follow him. They all start running down the aisle, with zombies trailing them. The man shouts, saying that there is an emergency exit, but the zombies emerge from the front of the exit. He shouts the word stop twice, and begins to tremble with the knife in one hand. He looks back and tells the group that taking on 3 zombies was too much for him. He tells the group to go another way, and looks in another direction. Then he sees his teammate Sewa being attacked by zombies. The zombies rip her flesh from her body. He curses as he looks at him, devouring her body. The zombies then begin to close in, from all directions. The group is now left with 5 people, in which only one of them has a knife. The man in the hoodie screams, then charges towards the zombies. He kicks it to the floor, then climbs on top one of the cabinets. He then tells them to get up quickly, and one by one he helps them up. But then as the last one goes up, a zombie grabs his leg. The zombie grabs it tight, not willing to let it go. Then suddenly the knife comes down to chop the zombie's hand off. He then chops it off, and the zombie screams. The man gets to the top safely, but then dozens of zombies start flooding the aisles. The zombies start reaching to grab the group from both sides of the cabinet. The girl with brown hair looks down and cries as she looks at what used to be Sewa, now reaching up to grab them. Everybody's faces start to get gloomy as they look at the zombified friend. Then the girl with blue hair yells at him, saying that they're being noisy and that they should stop crying because they were just making the situation even more depressing. She bites her nails, muttering that she didn't want to end up dying in a place like this. The man in black then looks up to the one with the knife, asking what they're supposed to do. He looks down silently, then says that he'll go down alone. He points down at the empty spot past the zombies and says that he was going to jump over the zombies and land there. He then says that when he does he's going to distract them, and in the meantime they should go get themselves up to the loading dock. He then says that if they think it's too hard they can just go back to the basement again. The man in black tells him that he's just committing suicide. Then he grabs him, saying that they can go to the dock together. Whilst he grabs him, the man screams at him, saying that he's going alone and that at least they should survive. The girl with brown hair then points to him to look over there. Then suddenly, a huge zombie runs through the horde, and grabs the man in black. He screams as the zombies grab a hold of him. The man with the knife tries to go after him, but his friend stops him. Suddenly an arrow flies through the large zombie's head. The dead zombie falls on the others, causing them to let go of the man in black. Then everybody looks in the direction from which the arrow came from. And we find Johan standing on top of a shelf with a crossbow in his hand. Then Johan says that he finally found him. The man dressed in black cries as he sees that he has been saved. He looks up and sees a group of zombies surrounding him. He screams and then crosses between one of the zombies' legs. The zombies prepare to attack him. One of them launches at him. Then, an arrow flies straight through its head. Several more arrows begin to hit the other zombies. It is revealed that it is Johan who has been shooting these arrows. The man looks up at Johan mesmerized. Johan realizes that he is out of arrows, then jumps at these zombies with his crossbow and begins to attack the zombies. He takes his blade and then slices one of them in half. The zombie sliced in half falls down to the floor around the other zombies. A zombie attempts to sneak attack Johan, but he notices and, with the cold gaze, attacks it with his elbow. Then, the zombie with a wife beater and a chain comes up to Johan trying to grab him, but Johan dodges. He takes his knife and slices the zombie. The zombie seems unharmed and looks back at Johan angrily. Johan looks at the zombie with sharp eyes, then takes two knives in his hands and begins to slice the zombie repeatedly. In the end, the zombie is unrecognizable. Johan then goes on to attack 3 zombies, and the zombies fall down. Johan looks up tiredly and sees that the group is looking at him. He then asks them what they're doing and then tells them to come down and fight. The group is shocked by this and decides to go down. The group makes its way down, and then a zombie attempts to attack the man with the knife, but he stabs it swiftly in the head. The knife gets stuck in the zombie's head, then he pulls it out, but as he does, a zombie attempts to attack him from behind. The zombie then gets hit by a can before it could take a bite out of him, and it seems that he has been saved by his little brother. As it seems that all the zombies are dead, Johan begins to pull his arrows out of them. He then tells them to follow him. The group eventually makes it outside and takes a break. Then Johan points to the man in black and tells him to take his clothes off. We then get a flashback of the leader screaming at Johan, saying he should live as he gets bitten by zombies. We then find that his name is Kang. Kang screams at Johan and tells him that he has to survive as long as he can. The door begins to close as it seals off Kang and the zombies he is holding back. His last words are that Johan shouldn't die on them. The door slams shut as Johan is shocked, then he hears something rattle behind the door, and then he hears the screams of Kang behind the door. Back to the present, Kang thanks him for saving the group and begins to introduce himself as Kang Gun, and because of Johan, Kang's younger brother is still alive. Johan thinks to himself that the very first person he can trust to have his back is Kang. He then recalls that in order to get to the loading dock located on the 3rd floor, which is above the ground floor. On their first attempt, Kang's younger brother got caught by the zombies and was ruthlessly torn apart. Despite Kang watching his younger brother die, strangely, he made a rational decision. In an attempt to escape the horde of zombies, Kang's brother was sacrificed as they all ran towards the emergency exit. However, when they reached the exit, he lost all of his friends to the zombies waiting for them, but you survived all alone, and he eventually safely arrived at the camp located on the ground floor. This is the story of when he first met him. However, now there is something fishy about it. Today's events should have happened 2 months later, but for some reason, their arrival at the loading dock is progressing at a much quicker pace. Furthermore, Johan remembers that he never heard of a female surviving on their first attempt, yet Kang has 2 in his group. He thinks that predicting the future will become even harder for him as time goes on. Johan then asks if they're using this building as their hideout. Kang answers yes, and that they were staying at the 1st and 2nd floors of the basement. Johan thinks that Kang is naive because he hasn't changed in his ways. Johan then asks how long they had been surviving down there. Kang hesitates, then says to Johan that before answering his question, he would like to ask him about something else. Something awful which happened a short while ago. Johan accepts and says that there is no need to be scared of asking him questions. Kang then says that since it looks like they're of the same age, he'll drop the formalities. Then he asked him group he was traveling with. Johan says none and that he's doing this all alone. Kang then determinedly asks that if that is the case, where had he been living all this time? Johan then says at his house where he has too many rations piled up. The group then looks at him with a look of shock. Johan then asks if they had a base, why they tried to escape. Kang hesitates and then asks how he would have known this. Johan then answers by saying that they wouldn't have left unless they were running low on supplies. Kang then says that it hadn't been easy for them and that there was a loading dock located on the 3rd floor, and that's why they wanted to break through the horde. Johan then says that there must undoubtedly be a big supply of noodle boxes and water there. Johan then explains that he searched around the whole building before everyone arrived here, but there were too many zombies around. The parking lots in the 2nd and 3rd floors and all of the emergency exits were blocked by zombies. Johan says that it was simply too hard to carry so many and supplies back and forth with so few people. However, that is completely possible for them to kill all these zombies in the building. Kang then looks at him with a shocked face and asks him what he is talking about. Johan says that he'll completely help them wipe out all these zombies in the market as long as he can stay with them. Kang exclaims that that is impossible and that the zombies will make a mess of everything if they get in. Johan then says that they should listen closely to what he is about to say. He explains that there are a total of 3 entrances to the mart. Before they start wiping out the zombies, they will have to block all the entrances. He then says that he has already blocked the 2nd floor entrance before coming here. The only ones left were the ones at the main entrance and the parking lot. The group is left speechless, but then the girl with blue hair says that she likes the plan. Later that day, the group begins walking down these stairs to the basement. Kang then explains that there is a total of 33 people, which includes 17 men and 16 women. Out of them, there are 13 elderly and 2 kids who cannot fight. Johan thinks to himself that there are too many people. Kang knocks on the door, and then he hears a voice asking for the password. He then says the password, the green sky. The door creaks open, and Kang invites Johan in. It seems that they are in a clothing section. As they go in, they are greeted by a man wearing glasses with a grey sweatshirt. He asks how the scavenging went. Kang looks down and, with tears in his eyes, says that they lost 3 on the 1st floor and that they are the only ones alive. Kang then asks how the others are. The man in the grey sweatshirt tells him that they are at the distribution center. He asks who Kang brought with him. Kang then says that he'll explain on the way. On the way, Johan notices a board showing the levels in which the different sections of the mart are located. Kang then begins to give Johan a quick tour of the place and explains that the survivors are currently living here. Johan then notices that there is an escalator. He asked how they brought it down. Then the guy with glasses says that he did it, and he did it because at the start of the outbreak the zombies were too many, so he got on it to his escape, which is how he ended up bringing it down there. He explains that he was an addict to anything regarding zombies and that he knew right away, so he had to get on something that could help him escape. As he was running down, he noticed that people started to follow him and some of them got bitten, so when he got to the room he stopped the escalator and blocked it with other items in the room so that no one could come down. Tears then begin to fall down his face as he says there were many survivors trying to get in, but Johan tells them not to regret it and that he did the right thing. The guy with glasses then says that when they were taking a rest, they heard a loud noise from the second-floor basement. And there was an infected among the survivors. So then they decided to block that entrance off. Johan then asks him how many zombies he's killed. He looks down with a look of disappointment and then says that he is a coward. Johan smiles, and says that he actually wants to congratulate him. He then asks him if he didn't think it was a good choice for him to watch so many films about zombies. Then everybody says the same thing, PSHHT. Later, Kang introduces Johan to the group of survivors. The group then asks Johan if there are any rescuers outside, and how the army and government are doing. Johan answers by saying that there is no government and the army is nearly destroyed. So, from now on they have to protect their own lives. The mood of the group of people starts to get low, and then Johan suggests that they have to go up and get food. The group of people then turns their back to Johan as they say that if they go up, they're just going to die, and they all start walking away. Kang tries to stop them from walking away, but they refuse, and they all leave. Johan then thinks to himself that the people are too weak, then the door shuts, and silence fills the room. Johan is then left with the girl with blue hair. She introduces herself as Sarah and asks if he can talk with her for a bit. She says that Kang didn't tell him everything and that about a week ago, there was a group of people who broke into the place. Johan is startled by this, and then he asks which people broken in. She says she doesn't know. Then Johan starts to get chills up his spine as he asks himself if it is them. The sole survivor Unity. Sarah then says that it was a group that occupied the mall across the street. Johan then lets out a sigh of relief. He asks why they came, and if maybe it was for food. Sarah then says that initially, they thought it was because of food, but it wasn't because they took 6 people at that time with her sister being included. Johan then thinks that if the beginning was different, that would mean that the group must be different. Johan asks if they had guns, and Sarah replies by saying that they didn't. Sarah then says that she'll start from the beginning and begins to take her jacket off. Johan then gets freaked out by Sarah undressing. Sarah then says that if Johan could save her sister, she would do anything, but then she gets interrupted by Johan hitting her. She then shouts out in pain, asking why Johan hit her. He then says it's because she deserved it, and continues to say that even if there are no laws anymore, they should keep the distance. She then asks if he won't save her sister and that he's scared of them. Johan then coldly replies that it's not that he is scared, it's that he is not sure. Sarah then asks what he is not sure of. He then says that he is not sure if the people in this camp are worthy of survival. Sarah is shocked at how scary Johan can be. Johan then leaves the room saying that she is naive and that he is going to talk to Kang. Later, Johan asks if Kang doesn't want to abandon the camp, to which he replies by asking what he means. Johan then asks how he feels about taking a few of the others and taking them to a different camp. Kang then laughs at the idea. Then, Johan suggests a new plan, and the two of them discuss it for a while. Later that day, they gathered up all the camp members. One of the members asks what the emergency meeting is about. Kang then explains that from then on, they'll be blocking the first floor entrance and kill all the zombies in the mart. One of the members then asks why he's talking about the mart again. Before he can finish talking, Kang says that from now on all the resources will be distributed to the people who participate in the fight. The crowd then breaks out in anger. They all insult Kang. Wome call him selfish, while others ask if he's telling them they should just throw their lives away. Kang then says that they have to fight to survive. He then turns to Johan, but he's nowhere to be seen. Kang begins to panic, and then suddenly, Johan kicks the door down whilst holding a zombie by its hair. He throws it down to the crowd, and then they all begin to scream in horror. Johan then says that he's brought practice and asks who wants to start whilst having a smug look on his face. Johan steps on the zombie then as he sees that there is no one, calls the crowd a bunch of cowards. Then, over in the distance, Sarah shouts out excitedly, saying that she can do it. Johan remarks that Sarah is the best out of the bunch. He then tells Sarah to wear gloves and protective gear. Sarah then asks what the gear is made of. Johan responds by saying it was made of cardboard and tape. Sarah sniffs the gloves, mumbles that the gloves smell like feet. Johan hears this, then tells her to shut up, and that when facing a zombie she should always position herself diagonally, and put her left arm forward. Sarah then tries to copy Johan, but she does it clumsily. Johan then says that the position doesn't have to be perfect. He then says that when fighting a zombie, she has to go low and lean forward. As he says this, the zombie runs directly at Johan. Johan then shoves his left arm in the zombie's mouth, then swats it to the side, causing it to lose balance and fall over. Johan continues to say that after the zombie goes down, you have to pivot on your left foot to not lose balance, and once the zombie is immobilized, she has to attack the head as it is hard to find the heart. Johan then stabs the zombie in its head and then trips it, causing it to fall over. Once the zombie falls to the floor, he finishes off by saying that the best place to stab it is its head. And that when you're hitting it from the back, it's best to pull its hair up so that the zombie faces up, which would make it easier to stab it. The zombie's blood splashes out of its head, and then we see people vomiting in disgust of what they have just witnessed. Johan then drops knives and says that he's going to fetch more and that they can try for themselves. He leaves the room, and the people are left shocked. Later, a zombie dressed in police uniform jumps forward, and then its head is suddenly sliced off. The zombie quickly falls to the ground. As it lies on the floor, Johan notices a gun sticking out its pocket. He smiles, thinking about how lucky he just got. Blood goes flying in the air. It seems to be Minseo who had just stabbed a zombie. Johan then comes around to congratulate her on killing the zombie. Later, it is revealed that only 7 people volunteered to go outside. Johan thinks to himself that he's lucky that there's 7 of them. Before the fight, Johan says that he'll divide the people into squads of 4. The first squad would include Johan, Sarah, Jongwon, and Elder Park. The second squad would include Kang, Hyuk, Minseo, and Jin. Starting from the entrance, the squads would move separately. Squad 1 would go to the second floor, and the escalator, and the second squad would go to the entrance. Once they arrived at the entrance, the people in the back had to protect the ones closing the door. Johan tells Hyuk that he'll have to protect his brother. Johan then jokes about not having to worry about Jongwon since he's the master of blocking things. Johan opens the door, and before going in, he tells everyone not to die. They all look nervous, but then they decide to open the door anyway. They leave the base with stone-cold faces. As they come out, they face a horde of zombies coming at them. Johan wipes his sweat off and says that it seems like these zombies at the escalator were cleared. He tells the squad to go meet up with the other group. Johan is shocked by them having cleared the area already. Johan smiles as he thinks that the mission was a success. But Kang looks down with a grim face. He slowly stands up and says to Johan that he has to tell him something. He pulls his glove off his hand and reveals blood dripping from it, as well as an infection from the zombie bite. Johan is left speechless, and everybody is shocked at what they see. Johan tells Kang to open his mouth. He does so, asking what he wants to do with him, but before he could finish speaking, Johan puts a cloth in his mouth and pulls his blade out. He tells Jin to hold his arm out. He prepares to cut his arm off, but his little brother asks him what he's doing. He replies to him by saying, Isn't it better to live than to die? Johan quickly cuts through his arm like a knife going through butter. Kang screams out in pain, looking at his severed arm. Everybody looks away as if they feel Kang's pain. And his little brother is horrified by what he sees. They quickly tie his arm up to stop the bleeding. Johan asks if they have a nurse or doctor among the people, but Elder Park replies that they don't have anyone who could help. Johan sees that he has lost too much blood. He tells the group that they are heading back to the basement and that they should keep the pressure on his arm. On their way there, they encounter a group of zombies. They then ultimately decide to deal with the zombies as fast as they can. Later, they arrive at the basement. Johan opens the door, and we see that the group has been running the whole way as they are all panting. Johan then says that the door is locked. Hyung is outraged by what he hears. Johan listens in, and hears that people are speaking on the other side. He comes to the conclusion that it was locked from the inside. He tries to kick the door down, but it doesn't work. He screams out for them to open the door but hears no response. Johan tells Hyuk to calm down and tells the people on the inside that he'll break the door if they don't open it. The people on the inside ask if there is anyone infected or a zombie nearby. Johan doesn't answer that question and tells them to open the door immediately. He sees that they aren't listening to him and tells them that if they don't open the door, in 3 seconds, they should prepare themselves. Because he won't let this slide. He starts counting, and then they immediately open the door. He coldly asks who locked the door, and the man in the green jacket says that it was him. He is then punched to the floor by Jean. The man says that he couldn't do anything. If they had come with zombies, they all would have died. He then says that if that was the situation, he would have been correct. He continues to say that there's not many people inside, and if the zombies had entered, they would have been unstoppable. The man looks at him shocked. Johan grabs his head and tells him to keep up the good work. He then asks what his name is, and the man replies by saying that his name is Jun. Johan says that he'll remember him and that the next time he hears his voice, he should open the door immediately. And if he delays like today, he will rip his body to pieces and feed it to the zombies. Later, Kang gets his arm patched up by Elder Park. Johan is surprised by his proficiency, and the elder replies by saying that due to his age, he has learned a lot of things along the way. Johan sees Hyuk sitting down, looking gloomy. He tries to say something but doesn't know what to say, so he just leaves him alone. He then tells the others to follow him. They go to the staff room. In the staff room, Johan opens a cabinet. In the drawer, he finds the keys to the room. He then tells the two to move all the food and water to this room. He then explains that they'll be controlling all the resources so that no one can touch them. We then go to a panel showcasing the group, moving the boxes into the room. The people are outraged at what they're seeing, and they ask Johan what he is doing with the food and water. Johan replies by saying that he was moving the resources to be stored. One of the people then asks how he could move the resources without approval from the others, and another guy says that he's monopolizing the resources. One guy says that there must be a misunderstanding, but Johan says that there is no misunderstanding. The community looks at him in shock. Johan then says that from now on, they're going to manage the resources and the distributed goods amongst the people. The goods will only be distributed once per day, so they shouldn't be late or else they'll starve. The group of people is outraged at what they are hearing. They make the case that they took Johan in when he had nowhere else to go. Johan silences them by saying that if they don't listen, there won't be any distribution of food to them and that they'll have to find their own food. He then announces that they're going to clear the upper floor and that everyone should participate. In cleaning up the corpses, he doesn't care if they fought or not, but everyone except the kids should participate. The group of people get angry at one of them decides to throw a paper at Johan. The paper hits Johan, and he doesn't care at all. It seems that it was a mother who threw the paper. She says that they were better off without him and that a dog like him doesn't have any place there. Johan looks at the paper, which crumbles open and reveals that there is doo-doo inside. He looks up infuriated. The mom shouts at him to leave immediately. Johan looks at her angrily. The group of people turns into an angry mob. One guy suggests that they should kick him out. The people start rushing towards Johan, but Johan seems unfazed. He smirks and thinks to himself that they were scared when they were hunting the zombies, and it seems funny to him that he's not as scary since he's the hunter of the zombies. He slowly pulls out the gun. One of the people running notices that he's pulling out the gun and tells the others to quickly catch him. Before they could do anything, a loud bang is heard. The people fall back in fear. Johan then says that they misunderstood something. He then says that he isn't a refugee who came here for help. And he's definitely not here to work. He would consider himself more of a conqueror. And with an evil smile on his face, he tells the people to shut up and follow the rules. The people are scared to death at what they've just seen. They are motionless and can't comprehend the situation they're in. Later on, we see food being packed into the storage room and Jun taking in the register of what is going in. We can see the angry mom from earlier receiving her portion of food and a line following up right behind her. Johan then sees the guy from earlier and tells him that he will be the manager. He says that he will be responsible for locking the doors for the safety of the camp. The crowded people mumble at what they hear, and the guy is shocked, too. The man then receives double depot portions of what everyone else received. The man's mouth waters at what he sees. One of the other people says that help applied to fight, so they should give him a full portion. Then other people start to speak up asking if there's anything they can do so that they can get bigger portions. Johan smiles in the background, thinking that everything went according to plan. Later on in the storage room, Johan sits on the desk and puts two guns on the table. He lets out a sign of relief. He thinks that he wanted to give the gun to Kang so that he would become the leader of the camp, but his plan was sidetracked due to Kang being infected. Johan doesn't know if he will be able to wake up from the shock, and even if he does, it will be impossible for him to fight. So, in this chaos, he can't be the leader. He also knows that Elder Park is too old, Minseo is too naive, and Jongwon is decisive, but it's not the right time to give his full trust to him. Kang's younger brother is too weak, and he relies too much on his older brother. He thinks about Sarah but brushes it off, saying that his thoughts got a bit too crazy. He thinks that Sarah might run away and that an emotional leader is too risky. He leaves the room undecided on who the next leader will be. Outside, he finds Sarah and Jongwon waiting for him. The two explain that they thought someone might want to hurt him while he was sleeping. He says that he's thankful for them and that they too need to rest. Sarah then asks why Johan is speaking without looking at her. She thinks that Johan was thinking about Sarah in an inappropriate way. Johan is dumbfounded by what he heard. Johan then asks if Sarah has good handwriting. Sarah then asks why Johan is changing the topic. Johan leaves, and Sarah now believes that she is right, leaving her angry. Johan takes a pen and paper and hands it to Sarah. She then asks what she is supposed to do with the pen and paper. He answers by saying that she should write down a warning sign that will be in front of the supermarket. Johan tells her to write down the following: "If you have an issue, come to the parking lot. If you break the window or create a disturbance, we will shoot." Sarah begins to write down, and as she writes down Johan says that he doesn't like to talk about talents, and before Johan could finish talking, Sarah tells him to shut up, seeing that you knows too. Jongwon then asks why they are putting a warning sign at the front. Johan tells him that after clearing all the zombies, they will have to deal with people. Just as Johan finishes speaking, Sarah says that she's done with the poster. The poster reads, "If you have an issue, come to the parking lot. If you break the window or create a disturbance, we'll shoot." Johan then comes to the realization that she could never be the leader of the camp. Later on in the night, Johan hears a bang on the door. He goes to open the door, and finds that Sarah is at the door waiting for him. Sarah informs Johan that the water has stopped. She says that both the men's and women's bathrooms have no water. Johan lets out a sigh and says that the good days are over. Johan realizes that the water tank on the roof is empty. He then tells Sarah to gather everyone up. Once the people arrived, they all spoke amongst each other while they were waiting for Johan to speak. Johan then notices that Hyuk is not present. Sarah then informs Johan that he doesn't want to attend. She asks Johan if she should go and force him to come. He says that they should just leave him since Kang needs someone to look over him. He then pats Sarah's head, whilst he says that she did a good job. Sarah then looks up to Johan, but Johan doesn't look at her. Johan turns his gaze and looks at the crowd of people sitting. He stares at them with a cold look on his face. The once rowdy crowd immediately turns silent. Johan then bends over to pick up his blade. He then announces that the water supply has been cut, and until they find a solution, the people should not waste the water left. He tells them to wipe their bodies with the wet wipe or pour a little water on a tissue. The crowd is clearly angered by this, but none of them dare to speak up. He then asks if any of them are dissatisfied by the way he is running things. He then says that they should think about 4 months ago. Back then, if they had controlled the situation, then they would not be in the situation and would be able to use clean water. He continues to say that he may not be friendly, but he will help everyone survive even after all the supplies in the supermarket run out. He says that he is leaving to go fight the zombies, and he hopes to see them again. Later at sunset, we can see Johan slicing his zombie, which then falls to the floor and has blood splattering all over the place. He shouts, saying that there are 2 on the right incoming. A man with a sharpened stick dashes forward to attack the zombies coming. He stabs both of them through the chest at the same time, which ultimately ends them. Johan smiles as he looks at the success his team has had. Junwon then asks if they're done as he puts the final body on top of a wall of zombies. Johan then says that he thinks so as he walks down an aisle filled with zombies' corpses. He then bangs on a metal frame with a rod. The noise can be heard throughout the supermarket. The noise then attracts a horde of zombies, which lines up at the windows. As he bangs on the metal, a figure is seen in the distance. As it comes closer, it starts to growl and is revealed to be a zombie. Johan then takes his bow and shoots an arrow to its head. After doing so, he raises his crossbow and declares that they have taken care of all the zombies. After hearing this, the group breaks out in excitement. Johan can't help but smile as he wonders why they were all acting like cowards up until now. The man with the bowl cut agrees and says that he didn't think that killing the zombies would be easy. Sarah then comes forward to say that it is all thanks to Johan. Johan smiles then says that Jongwon should check the group for any injuries. He then says that he is going to the parking lot to check out things are going there. Jongwon and Sarah agree and tell him to be safe on his way there. He arrives at the parking lot. He then opens the door slightly to not create any noise. He creaks the door open and looks only with his one eye. He then sees that the number of zombies is large, as well as there being a lot of cover which could be hiding others. He then sees an entrance that he sees could be easily blocked with 2 trucks. He then decides to head back when he arrives. He finds the group sitting down waiting. As he enters, the group stands up while looking at him. He tells the group to rest easy, then asks Jongwon if anyone was injured, to which he replies that no one was injured. Sarah then hangs warning signs on the window as she asks what the parking lot is like. Johan then says that it was neither good nor bad. He thinks to himself that if they wanted to block the entrance, they would have to find a car as well as the keys to a car, and the car's batteries can't be dead. He then speaks out loudly to the group and says that since they're all there, he would like to finish off the parking lot area. The people are stunned by what Johan is saying. He then tells them to stop fussing and asks if there is anyone who could fix a car. One guy then raises his hand and says that he is a mechanic. Johan then asks the mechanic how long he has worked for, to which he replies that he has been working for 4 years. Johan then smiles at the wonderful news, to which he thinks that there is already one less problem to solve. He then asks the mechanic if he could start a car without a key. The mechanic says that his name is Kimon and that he does, but he's never actually done it in practice. Johan then asks if he knows how to charge or replace a battery. Kimon then says yes, and all he would need is 2 cars. Johan then puts on a devilish smile as he looks towards the group. The group looks to Johan and they become very nervous. Later, we can see the group running away from zombies that are chasing them. The girl in pink then says that she should have never trusted Johan and that he is just a psychopath with a nice face. The group continues running away from the zombies. Johan and Kimon wait and hide behind a car. They then run quickly to sneak into the gap between 2 trucks. Johan then explains that their job is to find the keys for the truck and plug the entrance. The rest of the group agrees. Then, they start to open the doors of the trucks. As they do, a zombie jumps out from the door with its mouth wide open. Johan steps aside and evades the zombie, which then falls to the floor, as the zombie hit the floor. Johan takes his boot and crushes the zombie's skull. After doing this, he takes a knife and stabs the zombie to death. The group then begins to search the corpse for the keys to the truck. Johan then curses as he finds nothing on the body. He then looks into the CA, searching for the keys. He finds the keys in the keyhole and smiles and how lucky he is. He then tells Songbei to take the keys to the truck. He then says that when they find the keys to the other car, they'll honk the horn 2 to 3 times, and then that's when he can start moving. He then advises him that he should not leave any space between the wall and the truck when he's in the parking lot. Songbei nods and says that he understands the mission. Late, Johan asks Kimon how the batteries are looking. Johan then says that they had enough power to start the engine. Not long after, Johan tries to enter into other trucks but is not successful. He then tries the last truck, but it, too, is locked. Johan says to the group that they should try using the SUVs, and the length and width of them doesn't matter. They then go towards a black SUV. Johan looks inside and sees a black silhouette inside the car. He opens the car and prepares to strike the zombie. He then suddenly stops and pauses. He looks down and sees a baby zombie nibbling on his finger. Johan looks down with sweat pouring down his face. Yeah. He takes a deep breath and goes ahead to stab it. We can see the blood dripping out of the car seat. He enters the car and finds the keys to the car. He then calls Kimon over to check the battery. Kimon then says that the battery is empty. Johan within asks what cars would use the same battery as that car. Kimon then says that the car would need to be the same model. Johan says that since Kimon knows so much he should lead the way. They then come across a grey coupe. Johan and then opens the hood of the car and asks if the battery would suffice. Kimon then says that the battery was good enough. And that they should head back. As they head back, Kimon alerts Johan of zombies. Johan then asks how long it would take to replace the battery since there are too many zombies. The two then desperately start running away from the zombies. Kimon says that it would take 5 minutes and Johan complains, saying that was too long. Kimon then quickly changes it to 3 minutes. Johan then fends off the horde of zombies as Kimon changes the battery to the car. Johan then thinks that he is going to experience the worst physical test because he can't move or dodge to the side whilst he defends Kimon. We then move to a wide shot of the carnage that unfolds as Johan defends Kimon. Johan wields 2 daggers in his hand as he fights the zombies whilst Kimon works as fast as he can to replace the battery. Johan slices the neck of one zombie. Then, as the zombie falls down, he moves towards another zombie with the knife in his left hand. He then continues to slice the necks of zombies as Kimon works as quickly as he can on the battery. Kimon then starts to shake due to the stress. And begins to work quickly on the battery. His sloppiness then catches up to him as he drops the tool he is using. He bends over to pick it up, and then we are shown Johan getting swarmed by the mob of zombies. The zombies start to overwhelm him as we can see one grabbing his neck. Johan shrugs the zombie off his neck and yells at Kimon to get the car ready. Kimon looks back at Johan, then says that the car is ready whilst sweating up a storm. Johan then tells Kimon to get in and says that he'll be driving. The two rush into the car whilst avoiding as many zombies as he can. Johan starts the car and starts revving the engine. He then floors the gas pedal and starts running over the zombies. He continues speeding and, eventually he makes it out the horde of zombies. Once he makes it out, he honks his horn 3 times, which signals Songbei to continue on with the plan. Songbei floors it as he tries to make it to the entrance as fast as he can. Songbei eventually makes it to the entrance. He then drifts the car into position, while Johan drives right behind him. Kimon then compliments Johan on his driving. Then Johan replies by saying that he hasn't seen anything. Johan then explains that he'll show what a real pro could do. Kimon then looks at Johan with a bamboozled face. The two eventually widen the distance from the zombies and Johan starts to accelerate whilst running over the incoming zombies on the road. Johan then makes a quick and sharp turn, which causes the car to drift around the corner. After that, he then hits the brake paddle and begins to shift gears and reverse the car at full speed. As he reverses, he looks back at the opening in the entrance. He then looks forward and keeps going. Kimon yells at Johan, saying that they are going to crash. Johan sees that and decides to brace himself. The car collides with the other grey one, which causes the two to block off the entrance. The two and then slowly make their way out of the car, and Kimon remarks that the drive was awesome. But it really hurt his head. Johan slowly makes his way at the car. Once out, he apologizes, saying that he got a little bit too excited. After that, the key points his finger in the sky to signal the other crew. Jongwon noticed the signal and told the other group that it's their turn. The group makes their way out of a van with weapons in their hands. The van surrounded by zombies, which they start killing off individually. We then shift to a panel of Johan grabbing his sword. He grabs the sword with 2 hands and prepares to fight the large group of zombies. One zombie tries to attack him with its right arm, but he dodges to the left, pivots on his right foot and cleanly slices the zombie's head off, with a stone-cold face. He then takes a deep breath, and continues cutting the zombies down. Later on, the group is finished with the zombies, and we see Sarah lying down, taking a deep breath. The rest of the group is sitting around, and some lie down, saying that they are too tired to lift a finger. The group then has a discussion of how many zombies each of them killed. And Jongwon and the others say too many to count. Johan then tells them to stop whining and says that it was time to head back. The group rejoices. Later back at the base, a man grabs a hammer and points at the door handle. He looks back at the others beside him. He then raises his hand, attempting to break the handle. Then suddenly he hears a voice in the distance. The man tells them to stop. If they did so, he wouldn't tell anybody about what happened. The man with the hammer then asks if he is like his brother, who was a coward. The man then says that his brother lost his arm because he was weak. Kang's younger brother then grabs the guy by the collar and puts him on the door, whilst holding a knife. The rest of the group then runs away. He then remembers how Johan cut his brother's arm to save him. Later that day, Johan and the group arrive back at the base. They begin to clean up the zombie corpses, and a girl comes up to Johan. She pauses and then starts breaking down in tears. Johan, confused, and tells her that she could clean up later. Sarah goes to comfort her and tells Johan that cleaning up wasn't the problem. Before we could find out what the problem was, Johan tells the guy with the glasses to take a group with him to find Johan a container filled with bootleg movies. The rest of the group would take the corpses to the roof and burn them. Kang's younger brother then comes in the room, and Johan asks him how his brother is doing, to which he replies the same as yesterday day. Johan then pauses and tells him that he knows it's hard for him, but he must endure the pain. Kang's younger brother leaves, but before he does, he tells Johan that he doesn't blame him. Johan then says that he should blame him because he couldn't do what his brother did. Johan then walks up to him and asks if his friends still show up in his nightmares. He puts his hand on his shoulder, he looks at home, and says that he'll never forget them no matter how old he gets. Johan then whispers in his ear that he is weak, and that he should be the one leading them through this hell. He then walks away, leaving Kang's younger brother shocked. Later, we see that zombie corpses are being taken to the roof by trolleys, then it cuts to Johan unveiling the recently acquired food. The people get excited at what they see and start rushing towards the food. Johan then says that half of the food is rotten, but the rest should be good enough to last 2 or 3 days. One guy even gets excited at seeing a can of beer. Johan then looks at Sarah, saying that they need to talk. Later on top of the roof, we can see the girl from earlier, who was crying, running happily. She then looks out at the buildings and says that the view is perfect. The rest of the people grin whilst Johan folds his hands together whilst smiling. We then shift to a panoramic view of the city and back to Johan and the group looking out into the distance. Johan then looks out and thinks to himself that if only they had a doctor, they could treat the people properly. Jongwon then remarks that there are a lot of zombies. He thought that they had got 'em all, but he was wrong, and that humanity is doomed. Sarah then asks Johan if there are still people out there, to which he replies by saying that there are lots of people like them and even places that haven't even been affected. He then looks out and says that the time has come. A torch is lit and is thrown over the pile bodies. Sarah's and covers a mouth with a cloth and asks if it was necessary to burn them all. Johan replies by saying that if they didn't, the corpses could spread the infection. She then says that the fire is throwing attention and asks what they're going to do if someone comes. Johan says that if they're strong enough to survive out there, then they will use them. Sarah then asks what they will do if they're bad. Johan coldly replies that he will just kill them. Later, back in the base, people sit around the table with coffee on it. Some of the men celebrate the occasion with beers, and they all laugh happily. Johan then looks to Jongwon, saying that they are really lucky to have a water tank. But sadly, the people are a bunch of cowards. The elder Park comes in the room and calls for Johan. He gets to Johan and says that Kang has died.